Good morning. There's something that I've been wanting to do for a long time, so I'm going to do it. Justin, would you come here? I'm going to change things up here a little bit. I'm going to go do what I want to do, and Justin's going to take care of this. I'll see you in a little while.
Okay, can you guys hear me? Do we need to adjust the sound at all? You know, when he said he wanted to do this, I thought he was kidding. So, what are we going to talk about today? I guess I get to be the elephant in the room today. So, a couple weeks ago, Glenn held up this little certificate and he was talking about white elephant. And that's where I felt my message needed to go today, is be the elephant in the room. And we both got invited to this party where they're having a white elephant. And just to bring everyone up to speed, what they do is everybody brings a gift, and then you just sort through the gifts from the center of the room, and you know, you open it and then you specify what's in it, and then you get to trade 3 times. That gift gets to trade 3 times, and whoever gets it the 3rd time is stuck with it. So you got to be a little precautious on which one you want, because maybe the biggest gift in the middle of the room, you don't want to open that one because you want somebody else to open it. That way you can trade it from them. Well, Kelly brought the gift, and she had this little certificate in there, and it said whoever had this at the end of the night had to go through that short hallway and teach a message to the kids. Well, one of the youngest men that was in play, he was watching that gift, and you know, he knew that 3rd time it was going to be his, so he gladly took that. But as that went on, I wasn't in play. I had to be the chauffeur for my kids that night, so I didn't get a chance to bring a gift or participate, but I got to stand back and watch. And as I watched, there was somebody else in the room that was watching that gift, and he knew each time that gift transferred, and he knew that it was going to be the 3rd time, and whoever had it next was going to be stuck with that gift. Well, today's Glenn's turn to use that gift. He gets to make that trip, meet the volunteers, walk down that short hallway, and see what's going on down there. And to be honest, I think he was more nervous than what I am right here. So I'm actually worried about time a little bit, so we got to jump right into this. And I wanted to, clarify that I'm not the normal pastor. You guys, if you want a good message, come back next week. And if you're watching online, everything's normal. Don't be dialing the dispatcher. Everything's calm. So I thought I had till Palm Sunday to get a message ready, because we're working on something for Palm Sunday. So if you want to get your phones out and put a little message in there in your calendar to come back on Palm Sunday, that would be a good time to come back. Or if you're watching online and you normally watch at home, or if you're on the way to a volleyball game, it would be a good time to put a little message in your phone to come back Palm Sunday. So I thought I had till Palm Sunday, but as it worked out, I had 3 weeks to prepare a message, and just trying to figure out, listen to the Holy Spirit and see which way he wanted me to go. And he wanted me to talk about myself. And the people in this room that know me know that that's probably harder than a tithing message. That I think tithing would be a pretty easy message compared to talking about myself. So my first slide, to jump right into it, I have a picture of me with my siblings growing up. There was 5 of us. There was Joe, he was the oldest, and Josh, and they were old enough to be my babysitters, so I didn't really get a bond with them as much. And then the next one on the list is Jason on the left, and then it was me, and I kind of look like the kid on Sandlot, I think, so don't make fun of me too bad. And then my younger sister's on the right. So I'm the front and the middle, and that's who I am. So in talking about myself, I was on the fire department for years, and I made a little sign to hang on the wall, and that's the second slide. It said, "Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care." So I'm going to read that again. And that I had a friend of mine make it, and I hung it on the wall just so everybody in there knew they were there for the right reasons. You know, if you're on the fire department and you're looking for a thank you, you're probably not going to get it. You got to be there for the right reasons. So that sign said, "Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care." So I guess I get to get my church clothes out today. So if you're going to learn about me, I may as well put my church clothes on. All right. This is kind of my safety net, too. I feel like I'm a little more calm now. My safety. So if you're looking at this, you probably see the elephant in the room is the FTW up here. And don't be grabbing your kids and grabbing them out of here, because it's not I'm going to keep it calm, and it's not a derogatory thing yet. So the next one down on my vest here is a skeleton. And so when I'm riding, I got my skeletons with me, you know, and to me that my skeletons are kind of chasing the other demons out of the road. And my father-in-law, when I first got my bike, he gave me a little bell, and the skeletons and the bell kind of go together. So the bell, you know, everybody knows the saying, every time a bell rings, an angel gets its wings. So the bell to me is dropping 10,000 angels on the path in front of me and chasing the demons out of the way. Or maybe it's just ringing so my angel keeps up with me, I don't know. But so the next one down is my fire department patches. You know, that was one of the most honorable things that I've done. And it just worked out that it was time for me to give that up and retire. But when I was on the fire department, I had a little picture that was up in my sweatband in my helmet. It's my family, and now it gets to ride in my vest. So let's keep moving along here. So on this bell, it's got, you know, the fish all the way around. I don't know why my father-in-law picked that one, but Glenn talks about the fish in the back of the car a lot, and sometimes my fish turn into a piranha, like everybody else, you know. You know, I get road rage and that kind of thing. So not all the time is my fish the right reasons. So Glenn's never really talked about the meaning behind the fish. When I was my kid's age, I was in a youth group, and you know, that was one thing that I learned from that is the fish, the meaning behind the fish is when after Jesus was crucified, the Christians were all being gathered up and persecuted too. So when one Christian was looking to talk to another Christian, what they would do is they'd draw an arc in the sand. And if they knew they were talking to another Christian, the other person would finish the arc and create the fish. That's the whole meaning behind the fish. So and it's kept up. So when I was on the fire department, I was on for 17 years. 10 of the years I was a training officer and captain. So, you know, I had to do the training for everybody else, and it just had to be something to keep everybody interested. We couldn't always do the same thing. So for 10 years I did that. 11 of the years I was a first responder. 4 years as an EMT. So if anybody has the desire to do that, now's the time. If you're looking to volunteer and be in that role, and if you want to ride in the back of the ambulance, you don't want to do the fire department side, now's the time. If you want to do the fire department side and not ride in the ambulance, there's room for there too. And maybe now's the day that you reach out to your fire chief of your local department. So moving on, the one over here is kind of small, and it says, "Thank you to those who have served." No, it says, "If you've served our nation, thank you." So Glenn talks about our veterans a lot, and that one is kind of to the veterans, you know, if you've served our nation, thank you. But to me, it's more than that even. It's talking about our firemen, our EMTs, and our police force. But, you know, there's a lot behind these patches, and to me it's even our educators, our farmers, our truck drivers. It's the people that wear scrubs to work. This patch is for you. You know, it's to the mechanics that fix our brakes, our clergy, and our worship team. I could keep going. And the one above that is the POW. They kind of work together, but on here they work together, but to me they're two different things. Our POWs and our MIAs, you know, that speaks for itself, but to me it's even deeper than that. I had an uncle in World War II. He was in the 17th Airborne Division. And if you know any of the history behind that, the 17th Airborne was held as replacement, so they didn't jump in right at Normandy, and they weren't there with the 101st. I don't know if you've ever seen the Band of Brothers, but the 17th Airborne was held until the Battle of the Bulge, and they jumped in right into the thick of it. And my Uncle Smokey was in the 17th Airborne, and when he jumped out, everybody that jumped out with him, they were all shot coming in, and they all got shrapnel and everything else, and my Uncle Smokey had to hold his breath and hide from the enemy until nightfall, and then a family took him in, and you know, he had to go through the rest of his life. He died at 89 years old with shrapnel in his leg. So this patch, to me, is even our veterans that brought stuff home with them. You know, some of our veterans bring stuff home in their head that they're just not able to release. And this POW to me is our veterans that are prisoners inside their own head or inside their own body even. So that one's a good one. So my Uncle Smokey landed in the Ardennes in the Battle of the Bulge, and you know, he brought home a Purple Heart, but you know, some soldiers even brought home more demons than that. So back up here to the top, the elephant in the room. I don't know, if you Google this, don't Google it. Half of you probably know what it would mean if it's derogatory, but to me it's not derogatory, because in the picture I showed you growing up, my brother and I were inseparable. The one in the bottom and on the left was Jason, and we were inseparable. He was my best friend. You know, he was a rebel. If he was in trouble, I was probably in trouble too. But at the same time, if we had a snow day, he would be the one to get me out of the house, and we'd drag shovels all across town, and we'd do driveways, and we'd shovel sidewalks for the elderly and things like that. But he had a rebel side. But he also had the softest heart. So we shared rooms. He was my roommate. He was my best friend, a teacher. He was my bodyguard. One time he disassembled our family toaster just to see how it worked and then put it back together, you know. That was Jason. He just had a knack for things. He always had to look at things and see how they worked. And, you know, one time he even drug the garden hose out and filled up my mom's car for her. And then I remember this one time, after shoveling snow on a snow day, he taught me how to pack the best snowball, you know, how to do that. And then about a few minutes later, he taught me how to run really fast after we hit that car. We got away. So that's some of my skeletons that are here that transfer back and forth. You know, all these patches intermingle almost. That I have skeletons too, just like everybody else in this room. But Jason, he taught me how to be a Christian. I can remember my dad when we were young. One of the stories Dad would say is, if you ever get in trouble, go ahead and call me, you know. But if you only get one phone call, don't waste it on me. So my dad also said that Christians are givers and takers, and Christians are the ones that are walking the line, trying to do both at the same time. You have to learn how to be a giver and a taker, and Jason was a perfect example of that. So when I was about 13, Jason was probably 15 at the time. He was a year and a half older than me, so I don't know the exact things. He was doing a babysitting job, and And after he put the child to bed that night, we found a tattoo gun on the owner's table, and Jason got it out, put some. He learned him how to put ink in it and everything at right then, and he scrolled an FTW right down here in his belt line. And Mom was going to be mad when she found out about that. And I think my mom's watching online. So soon after that, August 9th, and the night of August 9th, the morning of August 10th, Jason was taken by a drunk driver. And so, we had to come together as a family, and right after that, Dad said, we're gonna have to find a way to forgive that person that took my brother. It was right away that our family gave that forgiveness. So this FTW is more, to me, like find the way. I had to find the way to live without my brother, I had to find a way to forgive God for taking him. I had to forgive Jason, find the way to forgive him for accepting being taken almost. It was a bad spot for me. So my FTW is more find the way instead of the derogatory, brash meaning behind it. But forgiveness is easy to revoke. Like, that was August, so Thanksgiving came really fast for us, after everybody went home and the flowers stopped coming and the food stopped showing up. Thanksgiving came really fast. So we had to find the way to keep that forgiveness and not revoke it at Thanksgiving and at Christmas. And at the next March 31st, when my brother would have turned 17, it would have been really easy to revoke that. And we had to find the way to, keep that forgiveness for that young lady that decided to drink and drive and run my brother off the road. And so I mentioned that my brother and I were in this youth group, and after that, we were in there one night, and it was a round table event, and we all had to describe something that we wanted to be like. And as it came around, people were trying to decide if they would rather be Michael Jordan or Scottie Pippen at that time. And some people were the obvious. They wanted to be like Jesus. Well, when it got to me, I said I wanted to be like my dad. So in this next story, I'm going to travel across from the FTW into the cross, and that one is almost just as hard to talk about because that's you guys in this room. And my mom had a way she prayed and she could ask for signs for things, and she could be specific, and she could ask, well, I need to pray for a sign, and I want it to be 2 yellow roses delivered by this person. And right after my brother died, my mom, of course, wanted the sign that her son made it to heaven, and a family friend of ours delivered right away. She got her sign, and it was exactly what she prayed for, and it was exactly the time that she wanted it, and it was exactly the person who was supposed to bring it. So that brings us up to travel across my chest into the cross. My mom had to put her dog down this year. She had it for 17 years, 16 years, I don't know exactly. So she prayed like she always has. She wanted the sign that dog made it into heaven. So oddly enough, it was a Christmas Eve service. She put her dog down right at that day. So I invited her to Christmas Eve thinking, well, they're probably not going to come because this is going to be too hard for her, And she came, and, Kent Shaney met her at the door. And Kent Shaney, he's an icon of the church, isn't he? He can look at somebody and just know what they need to hear. So my mom made it through the door, and we got to the seats, and my mom got her sign. Daisy came up right away. I don't know if you're new here, Daisy's a church dog. So Mom prayed for a sign. Well, instead of that double roses on Christmas Eve service, it was a daisy. And Daisy came up and licked my mom's hand, and Daisy was the exact color of my mom's dog, so she knew that that was her sign on the same day that she asked for it. So that just goes to show, you know, my mom's not, I wouldn't consider her a member of this church, but that night she got what she needed from us. You know, we could open up our church in a way to serve somebody like that, and she could find her religion through us. So my family, we came to this church through Little John's, just like Pastor Glenn talked a few days ago, that somebody else came through Little John's, and I just wanted to talk about that a little bit because, you know, just because Little John's is the establishment it is, doesn't mean that we have to go there in that fashion. No different than if I stop at Casey's and fill up my gas and go in for a slice of pizza, doesn't mean I always go into the beer cooler. You know, I've never been into the beer cooler even, but I can stop and get gas. And Little John's is, when you stop at Little John's, even before you order your food, they care more about you than what you want to eat. You know, they always ask, how's your mom doing? How's your dad doing? Or, you know, if the kids aren't there, they always ask, well, how are the kids doing? So this one time we stopped there, and before we even ordered our food, they asked us to come to church, and they said, I think you would like our pastor. You'd get along good with Glenn. So we came, and we've been coming ever since too, just like Glenn said a few weeks ago. So that brings me to my last picture. And this one's going to be, you know, the bicycle and the Harley. And this was our bike blessing that we did last May. And, you know, the owner of that bicycle, they have their own church too, but today our church was for them. And they have one that they usually go to, and this day our church got to be for them. And you know, the owner of that Harley, he probably spent 3 hours polishing that thing. And the kid with the Huffy, he probably spent just as much time polishing his. And he wanted the same blessing as what that Harley got is what he wanted that Huffy to get through our church. And this even goes deeper than that. You see, the Huffy's leaning against the Harley because it was made without a kickstand. You know, most of these bikes nowadays don't even have a kickstand. I'm glad my Harley does. I don't know what I'd do with it. But that Harley was able to be the prop for the bicycle that, you know, that kid had the same idea of his bicycle as what Tim has of his Harley. He wanted the air pressure to be just right for that day. He wanted, you know, the spokes to shine. And he was able to work through us with everybody in this room, and he got to meet Kent Shaney coming through the door, just like Kent would for everybody in here. So soon after we started coming to the church, a family friend of ours passed away. And our church got to be the host church for that funeral. They had a lifelong church, but you know, my friend was a little different than everybody. He had mental disabilities, he had addictions that he was fighting his whole life, and then I think he was 59 or 60 when he passed away, and he dealt with mental addictions and mental disabilities his whole life. So when I read the obituary and seen that our church was going to be the host for the funeral and the visitation, I wondered to myself, how's Glenn going to do a sermon for somebody like that he didn't even know? So we got here, and, you know, Glenn would never tell you this, but I can brag about him a little bit. He's humble, and he doesn't want us to brag about him. You know, we invited him one time to a family reunion type picnic we were having at the house, and he flat out told me he wasn't going to stay very long because he wanted everybody else to be themselves. He didn't want to be the pastor there. And that way, if he left, everybody could be in their own skin and not worry about what, you know, if a curse word came out, or, you know, if a story from their past skeletons showed up. So he left, and, you know, he was the same person for this funeral. He didn't back down. He got up here and he talked about how we need to accept people like that. And, you know, he really nailed that right out of the park, and he didn't even know the guy. And I can tell you that. Glenn would never tell you that. Yeah, I couldn't be more proud of him. You see, but the truth behind that, we all have our addictions. You know, this Mountain Dew up here, I wasn't coming up here without my Mountain Dew. We all have our mental disabilities. We all have our own way of thinking and our own way of communicating with others. And, you know, this church here for me is for me, you know. Just like the kid on that bike, he's visiting here today just for me, but he has his own church that works for him, and our church works for us. But they can come here and they can get their bike blessed through us in the same fashion we do. You know, if we weren't messed up, we wouldn't need church. I'm going to brag about my pastor, Glenn. He's available by the prayer box out here. If you're watching online and you need a prayer, stop in the driveway and write it down on a McDonald's napkin if you have to, and put it in that box. You know, we got the prayer box. Or, you know, if the kid's sitting over here, if they need a prayer, or if they just need to talk to somebody that's not their dad, they can text Glenn. You know, they can even look him up on Facebook. That just means so much. So, how am I doing on time? So last week was the Jericho message, and, you know, at that time I was still trying to decide what I needed to talk about. And, you know, that message really hit home with me because this isn't me getting up and talking in front of everybody. I really had to knock my walls down to get up here. I mean, Glenn and I both felt that I needed to get up here. I don't know how he felt that. I never communicated that, but there's times in church where it just feels like the Holy Spirit's going to lift my chair up and set it right here. So I wanted to leave that out for everybody, you know, mainly me. But so that Jericho message last week, it was just ironic that I seen in that message I needed to get up here, and I needed to knock my walls down, and I needed to talk about my brother. And I needed to talk about things that are important to me. That way, you know, I told Glenn right away that I can't get up here and put scripture to what I'm talking about because I don't know the backstory of the Bible well enough. Maybe he can do that. You know, to brag about him a little more, I wrote down here that Glenn has a lot of the characteristics that my brother had. He has a special way of accepting people for who they are and not judging the way they were when they walked through that door before, you know, their past skeletons. He has a way he can accept them for who they are. And I'm proud to say that's my pastor. That's your pastor. You guys in this room, you're my cross. You know, most people would look at this and just think, oh, he's a Christian. But there's so much more behind being a Christian. So, Glenn, if you want to work your way up here.
Did I leave you up here too long?
No,
Good for you.
I think I went over my time.
That's all right. That's all right. Thank you. I appreciate it, bud. I really do. Thank you.
Thank you.
They must have done something right. They never did that for me. Sit down, sit down. Thanks, Justin. I appreciate it. I needed to do that, so. He probably told you what I did. Okay. Last week when we talked about the Jericho thing, Abby, I'll just be a few minutes. So, last week when we talked about the Jericho thing, and there is, I think what he was talking about, a white elephant in the room. Justin, did you bring that up? I did. The white elephant in the room of this story is Rahab. She's the prostitute. And before they crossed in to take Jericho, before the walls went down, they sent in 2 more spies. Just the way they did it before. They love sending spies, right? They sent in 2 spies. And these 2 spies actually go to the house of the prostitute, Rahab. And they saw them go in there. They knew they were Israelites. You see, as Christians, we shouldn't see things the way the world sees things. And I'm going to try to make this just as quick as I can and make my point here. When you see somebody go into the house of a prostitute, what do you think they're going to do? I'm trying to keep this PG, so just bear with me here, right? And yet Rahab actually helped them out. Now, Rahab, we don't really know, was Rahab doing this by choice or their culture back at those times? Rahab might have been said, you're going to be her, and you're going to do a service for our people. This is the culture that they had. We don't really know a lot about Rahab's past. But if you saw 2 Christians walk into a house like that, the world would think one way, and you would think that exact same way. And we got to stop that. We really do. It's like that Justin's vest has this FTW, did he mention that? Maybe I should just point that out, huh? This is how the world sees this. Everybody know what that means? I'm not going to say it. But is that what you see as a Christian? Is that what you see? You go right for those things. You go right for the things that the world sees. And this is what they're going to... I thought maybe I blew up or something. Rahab simply helped those men out. And she actually said, your God is the God of heaven above and on the earth below. Immediately, you could tell that she really had this belief and this faith. And we don't see her that way. We really don't. In fact, every time she's spoken of, she's got this label. Do you realize what she did was she hung out the red rope and let them down, and she was supposed to keep that red rope hanging out that window, so when they came and took over Jericho, they would spare her. That was the sign. Just like in Passover, where there's blood around the corner of the jams. When they saw the scarlet rope, she was going to be spared. You realize Rahab is you and me. We haven't done everything right, but yet God will spare us. Rahab actually turns out to be the great-great-grandmother of King David. And that also makes Rahab an ancestor to Jesus Christ. You see, the world saw her one way, and I'm afraid that you do too when you read this, when actually she's the one that set all this in place. We need to stop seeing people the way the world sees people. We need to stop seeing things the way the people see things. We need to stop seeing Rahab as a prostitute and see what God saw in her. There's good out there. And regardless of what you see on somebody's vest or something, you can judge all day long, but you better not start drawing a conclusion because you don't really know, because you're not looking at somebody the way that God looks at them. Rahab could have very well been a slave to the Canaanites that said, this is what you're going to do, and she only wanted to find a way. Was that part of his message too? She found a way by helping these two spies that came and actually set into motion God's people taking what God had for them. We need to stop looking at the world the way that the world looks at the world. We need to start looking at the world the way that God looks at the world. We need to start looking at people the way that God looks at people. Not the way they're labeled, not what their past is, nothing like that at all, because that's not what God sees. If you belong to the world, it would love you as its own. As it is, you do not belong to the world, but I have chosen you out of the world. That's what Jesus said. But yet we act like we're of the world. We talk like we're of the world. We see other people as though they're part of the world, and they're not. Jesus also said, for they are not of the world any more than I am of the world. My prayer is not that they take them out of the world, but that they protect them from the evil one. That they are not of this world, even as I am not of this world. Stop looking at things the way the world looks at them, and start looking at them the way that Jesus looks at them. And I'm huge on this. We need to start acting this way. Rahab's heart changed. We don't know when, we don't know how, but she actually was doing the will of God. And she's mentioned many times in the Bible, and she's still labeled that way. We don't have to be labeled that way anymore. Rahab doesn't need to be labeled that way. She found the way. It's not about the place she was at, it's not the building, it's that she changed. Her mindset changed. The people looked at her differently. This is what changes. It doesn't matter where you're from, what you've done, where you're going to go when you leave this place. It's about your heart. And if we quit looking at people the way the world looks at people and start looking at them like God looks at them, you'll see just how good Rahab was. She may have been a slave to somebody else, but she doesn't have to be a slave to fear. And you don't have to be afraid of your past anymore either. We are the Rahabs. We have not done everything right, and Jesus Christ is going to spare us if we turn our hearts, turn our minds, turn our ways to go the other way. You don't have to be a slave to your past. You don't have to be a slave to the fear of that. Each one of us in here has some sort of a past. Maybe some are worse than others, and maybe you're labeled by that. And I know a lot of you well enough, I probably better not look at anybody specific, but you used to do this, and you used to do that, and you used to do that, and you used to do that, and Rahab the prostitute should not be called that anymore. Why do we? Why do we call people like this? We won't let them forget. Maybe they've had a heart change. Maybe things have just gone bad for them in the past, and now they're not. And we won't let it go. We're even going to label them this way. Well, I got news for you. You don't have to be known for that anymore. Rahab should now be looked at as the great-great-grandmother of King David. Can you imagine being Rahab, doing the right thing? She stopped what she was doing. This is all in Joshua chapter 2. Go read it. It's awesome. She takes the spies, she hides them out, she does God's will. And of course, the guys saw the Israelites go in there like, they're visiting our Rahab. What do you think we should do with them? Well, of course, the way that the world would look at him, well, they're visiting Rahab. Trying to keep it PG. But they weren't. They were actually doing the will of God. You can too. Start right here, right now. And don't let anybody label you anymore. When Rahab became a grandmother, and her grandson became the king, King David, you think she was still called Rahab the prostitute? I hope not. Because she's actually an ancestor of our Christ. Why don't we call her that? Oh no, we're still going to call her prostitute, right? Just like everybody else in here. I better not start naming names, right? You don't have to be a slave to that anymore. Go from this place and be this new creation. The old is gone, the new is here. That other person is gone. And if you act that way, maybe other people will too. But you know what? Don't be a slave to that fear. Because you and I both know that Rahab turned out to be real good. And so do we. Let's pray. Father God, thank you. Thank you for the people that you put in our paths. Thank you for the lessons you give us as we go through life. Thank you for the relationships that we have, and we want to make sure to see them the way that you see them, not the way the world sees them. God, open our eyes to what you see. Open our hearts to what you feel. Open our ears to what you hear. And don't let us fall into that trap of treating and being part of this world. It's in your Son's beautiful, awesome name. Amen.